Presenting the Parachute Peeps, an upscale version of the Hubbadubno Bubblegum Sparkle Dun. Spring is certainly in the air. So grab a cup of chill as we sit back and go on the Vise with the FlyOlderGuy. All right, on the Vise we have a size 14 dry fly hook in a standard size. And I'm going to load up the bobbin with some pink A-dot uni thread. It's going to work nicely with our pink dubbing. So we're just going to lock that thread in, get it started right around the midpoint of the shank, trim off the tag end, and I'm going to put down a nice thread base on this back half of the shank because I don't want any of our materials to slip around as we tie them in. So I'm going to go back just about to the bend. We'll leave it right there while we grab our Sparkle Emerger yarn. This is a light tan color, and this is going to help accentuate the tail. It's going to give the tail some sparkle, and it's also going to be incorporated into the parachute. So I pulled off one strand of that and measuring out about one shank length, and we're going to tie that in right there at the back. And you can see it's flopping around a little bit. It's getting a little crazy on me there. So what you want to do after a minute or so is check it, make sure it's locked in. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to trim it. Trim it just about as long as you want that parachute twist post to be. I'd say about an inch or so. That should be plenty. You'll see what I mean by parachute post twist in a second. So wrapping back, securing this submerger yarn here. And then we're going to wrap forward, and I'm going to set the sparkle yarn at the post point. So I'm going to wrap upwards to the point right where I want that parachute post to be located, and then I'm going to lock in that sparkle yarn right there at that point. Check it, and that's right about where I want it, like just about a quarter of the way back. Like lifting it up there, you can see that's right about where we want that parachute post to sit. Now for the tail, it's going to be Comparadun. It's short, light colored. It's good for this fly. And I'm just grabbing a few strands, very, very few. You're not making a wing, it's just a tail. So maybe 9, 10 strands, 10 hairs at most. I'm not even going to stack them, just kind of pluck off any uneven ones, a little too crazy, a little too wily. This tail has that emerger yarn in it, it's sparkling, so it's going to be more of an attractor tail. So with a pinch wrap, a few loose wraps to get it started, and then I'm going to tighten it up. You'll see I kind of wrapped through a couple of the butt end hairs, and that helps really secure these Comparadun hairs. They could flail out on you sometimes, but if you put 1 or 2 wraps through those butt end hairs, it'll help secure them. So once they're nicely secured, I'm going to preen them up and separate them from that other end of the emerger yarn and just trim them off nice and close. And you'll notice that I did not measure that Comparadun. Let me trim that piece out. When I laid it in, I had that emerger yarn to, give me an idea of how long the tail is. So I just sort of set it in place right next to that emerger yarn. So I'm going to secure everything with some nice touching wraps all the way back right to the bend. I want the tail to be as close to that bend as possible. right there. And then once it's where I want it, I'll just advance the thread a little bit. And we're going to tie in some wire. This is some small silver wire. Going to cut off about 2 inches. And it's going to help give the body a little segmentation and also a little bit of shine in there too. So a couple of loose wraps first, and then we can adjust the wire to the length that we want it, and then wrap it in with some nice tight securing wraps back to the tail, and then advance the thread forward, covering everything and also starting a little bit of a taper here already. You can see that back portion of the body has a nice taper to it. And right up to where we have that emerger yarn tied down, and then I'll pull that back and put a thread base in front of that. That's going to help us when we tie in our parachute post. And for the parachute post, we're going to use some of this polypropylene floating yarn in white. Going to trim off 1 card length, and we're going to tie that in right at that point where we have that emerger yarn tied down. A few tight wraps to get that locked into place. Looking good, and we'll check it. We're going to pick it all up, and I'm going to twist the polypropylene yarn and just leave the sparkle yarn there kind of sticking out. You see how it's sticking out, but then the floating yarn is twisted up nicely on top of itself. Adjust it a little bit and make sure it gets locked in the front. That's it. The first few wraps, you're still able to kind of maneuver it and get it locked in where you want it. Okay, it's looking good. We'll wrap it down a little bit. There's a few more wraps there, and then we'll just trim off these butt ends of the polypropylene yarn. Get this nice and close to the eye of the hook there. Not too many wonky fibers, a couple are okay. And then trim the back up nice and close. I'm trying not to cut any tail fibers or the parachute post itself. So, don't be afraid to take your time here and there so that you don't make a mistake. So you don't cut the thread, or you don't cut, like I said, any of these tail fibers. There we go. That looks pretty good. And preen that post, and then build up a little bit of a thread base right behind the eye there, and back to the post. And we're gonna start to tie off the base of the post a little bit. You can see how I kind of do the swinging motion in the beginning. Very helpful in just getting that locked in at the base. And then once you have a nice little base of the post, you can wrap it a little more freely up. I'm going up about 1/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to work my way back down, slowly but surely. And you can see the post now is nice. It's firm. It's already looking good. So give it a little twist, keep it out of the way, and work that thread back, overlapping, if you can, and you can see it's building up a nice taper already. And we're going to take the thread right about to the hook point. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to grab some of my bubblegum colored dubbing. And for this, we'll call it the Peeps colored dubbing. This is, I had to do my own blend. And I'm going to grab just a little pinch of it and apply a nice thin noodle. I'm going to build up the body back here, leaving a little bit of bare thread also. I'm going to do a couple wraps back and start right there at the tail, and then start to build up this dubbing body upwards. I always like to put a little bit of dubbing at a time, tighten that up, and just grab a little bit more. I'll throw a little bit more on there. Now, I've blended in some white rabbit fur from some zonker strips in with more of a much brighter color, pink. And the two of them blended together gives you more of this bubblegum color. You guys can leave some comments if you want to see dubbing, blending videos. I can do some with some of the different blends that I use, and I can set that up. That'd be a lot of fun. So anyway, little by little, building this dubbing up so that I have a nice plump looking body. I like the body right up to the thorax to be plump. Now I'm adding a little dubbing here to help grip that other dubbing down and tighten it up a little bit. So it's just going to be a couple of overlapping wraps here right up to the post. That looks pretty good. We're right at the post. I'll go in front just to save my work a little bit. And we'll go back one. And I'm going to have to wrap up this wire. And the wire is going to be tightly wrapped. I want to have a nice segmented look to this body. And it's also going to help to lock down the dubbing. And the dubbing was a little thick there, you saw. But now after several nice tight wraps with the wire, it's got a good taper to it. And you can leave the wire bent downward and then work your thread just around it. Just have to kind of tweak it here and there. You don't have to worry about holding the wire the whole time though. So a few nice wraps to lock in the wire, and I'll grab my material scissors. I always have a different pair of scissors to cut materials that are a little bit harder. And we're gonna wrap that in, advance the thread to the front side, and we're gonna grab our hackle. And I'm going to size the hackle. This is a size 14 hook, and this hackle is just proud of 16, about a 14. It's going to do nicely to just be the right size here. Now you see, again, like with the wire, a couple of loose wraps first, and then you're able to adjust that stem to where you want it, right next to the eye, right behind the eye. All right, so once that's locked in, we're going to lift up the feather and wrap back up the post. And a few touching wraps up the post. Again, about a quarter of an inch. And then we're going to wrap it back down the post once our feather is in place. You can see I left a little bare stem on one side of the feather, and I'm also wrapping it in with the inside facing out, the inside of the feather facing out. Now that's all wrapped in, locked in nicely on the post. Advance the thread back up towards the eye of the hook, and I'm gonna dub up the front portion. Gonna grab a little bit of dubbing to start in the front. Let's see, we're gonna thin noodle, of course, but a nice thin dubbing noodle here. The front, you're gonna build, a little head section. Leave a little bit of thread right there to just go behind the eye. You see how it's a little bit of bare thread? And then start to build the dubbing back to the post. And tighten it up a touch there. It looks like we need a little bit more to cover that center thorax area right behind the post and underneath the post. So I'm going to add a little bit more dubbing and then go back over the back section, 2 wraps there, and then over the front, looking good. And I like to leave my thread in the front when I wrap my parachutes. So I'll grab the hackle and I'll start working my way down. This is a lot of wraps here on this hackle. I think about 7. It's a quarter of an inch at the base there of thread base. So gives you a nice amount of room to really wrap that hackle down. Once I have it where I like it, I'm going to lock it in, carefully working underneath those hackle fibers. 3-4 wraps on top, and I like to put a wrap underneath the feather. You can see how it kind of props it up there too, right before you trim it out. Helps trimming it out. Gets it up, gets it out of the way. You can see that. We can sneak those scissors in easily and just pop it right off, and there's no trapped fibers over there. So I can grab my whip finish tool, and I'm going to do a horizontal whip finish. Again, trying to be careful to stay underneath those hackle fibers as much as possible. I really don't want to trap any. Inevitably, you're going to trap some fibers. I know I trapped some here. I think right there. I think I trapped some. But that's all right. Give a 5-turn whip finish. And we're going to just trim it out right there. And another little fiber there. Checking the underside. You can see I did trap some. But first things first, let's get this post trimmed out. We got a nice height right there. And the sparkle yarn mixed in with that post. Nice. It's nice. Now to secure the hackle to the post, we're going to glue in that thread. I like to just put a little bit of glue on my bodkin, just like that. And then just the slightest little drop inside right at the base of that post should do the trick. That's it. Just a little bit of head cement just to glue it in place. It's looking pretty good. It really is. Give it a nice inspection. The profile's nice. I did trap a little hackle fiber on the other side, a few, and I'll trim that out later or before I take this video. So that was it. That was the Parachute Peeps. A great spring and summer fly. I hope you guys enjoyed the tie. Until next time, stay fly.